Hi everyone, I'm Jen. Welcome back. Today we're going to talk about is a hierarchy the only way that polyamory with kids can work? And by hierarchy, here we're talking about a hierarchy in which the relationship between the biological parents is at the top of the hierarchy. So, first of all, I'm just going to say no, of course, that's not the only way it can work, and we're going to dive into it. We're going to talk about why people consider this. Is it a good idea? Questions to ask yourself if you're considering it. And then finally, I'm going to end with an alternative way to think about this that I think might be really helpful to a lot of you who are coming from this place. So I'm Jen. I'm a holistic family consultant. I support polyamorous parents to lead deeply fulfilling lives and other folks who want to integrate a non monogamous, queer, or neurodiverse identity better in their lives as adults. All right, so it's really, really common for people who are opening up a previously monogamous relationship to start in this place. You know, where they had a marriage or something along those lines and kids and were monogamous. And now they're considering or starting to open up the relationship, and there's often a fear that polyamory is going to damage that couple relationship and therefore by extension hurt the kids. And of course no healthy parent wants to do something that's going to hurt their kids. And so what I often see is people sort of sectioning off polyamory, and both in a sense of like the kids don't know, other partners don't meet the kids, like it's a completely separate parenting and partnership are completely separate areas of someone's life. And uh, so there's a lot of things. One thing I hear a lot is that it's going to confuse kids. And uh, you know, if you're in this place and your big concern is like what's going to happen to my kids if they know that these other partners exist or something like that, and you're wondering how to talk to your kids, how to explain it to your kids, that's maybe a different question. So let me know if that's your question and I can make a video or we can talk about it. This is more about like, is that a good idea? And so there's also this piece here that I want to name that is if you are in a relationship, particularly if it's the parenting relationship, that looks from the outside like the typical societal expectation of monogamous, married, with children kind of relationship, that passing privilege can sometimes be important for safety. Not everyone has a family or work or community environment in which it is safe to be out as non-monogamous. So if that's the case, that is one consideration, is if there's a need for safety to pass. It can also be a fear or a thing to step into little by little of letting go of that passing privilege. There can be fears about, if I start to let people know, or if I tell my kids, they're going to tell all the kids in school or whatever. And that then there's going to be questions or stigma or things like that. So that can be one piece is, and differentiating. Is it about safety or is it about discomfort for the adults? So starting to get into, is it a good idea to have this hierarchical adult, the bio parent relationship at the top of a hierarchy, and then outside partners are secondary to that. And the first question I'm going to ask is, are the children's needs being well met by this? And often the answer is yes, but not always. But it's important to start there. Is the arrangement meeting the kids' needs well? And then the second question is, are the adults getting their needs well met, or is someone sacrificing? Is someone uncomfortable with this and would like to have a different structure and is sacrificing what they really want for the comfort of the other parent? So if that's the case, there probably needs to be more digging. And are the outside partners, the third question would be, are the outside partners really understanding the dynamic of the relationship and consenting to it? Because there are some people who will be like, yep, I get it. I'm a secondary. If there's a veto, I understand. Like there are people who will be like, yep, I understand and I'm here for it. There can also be situations, and what I see sometimes is where someone is trying to walk this line of like having the depth and care that they want with a partner who is not their nesting and parenting partner, and also adhering to these limitations on the relationship that are a part of the agreements with the nesting partner, and that the secondary partner doesn't really fully understand that they're secondary until something happens and they get disposed of. And that's not ethical. It's not ethical to not fully communicate the limitations of what you're available for in a relationship. So that is a piece. And if that's happening, it's also an indication that the structure is not really working for the person who's trying to walk that line. Because if it was really working for them, it would be easier to just say, hey, this is what I'm available for. This is what I'm not. So is everyone involved, adults, children, all partners, is everyone involved really understanding what the structure is and is on board with it? And then the last thing to consider about whether or not this is a good idea is, are the adults in the most common instance of this, the adults that are in the relationship at the top, the parenting, often bio parent or step parent relationship at the top of the hierarchy, are those adults still working through their fears and insecurities about polyamory, about any jealousies they might have, about whatever challenges could come in their relationship? Are they still working on those things, or are they using the hierarchy as a way to not feel like they need to work on those things? Because those things will still come up. Hierarchy does not stop feelings from happening. It doesn't stop life from happening. It doesn't stop things from changing over time. So it's really important, if even if this is a structure that is working for all of the people involved, that people are still doing their own personal and relational work to grow. And so now talking about what are the things you might consider if you're like, I don't know, I'm in this situation and I'm not sure if it's working for me and I might be wanting to consider changing it, or I'm considering whether or not this is the structure I want to implement. Some things to think about. And my notes are really small, but I'm doing my best to read them here. So one thing I want you to consider is, a lot of times people think about like, oh, if I introduce my child to other partners, like what if we break up? My child will be crushed. They've developed this relationship. And yes, and again, that's probably a whole separate video because I could go down a whole rabbit hole about how to have healthy relationships between partners and what happens if people break up, and things to consider before introducing a partner to kids. And that's a whole other topic. So again, if that's a thing you want to know about, ask me, we'll talk. But taking the romantic or sexual relationship out of it, there are probably people in your children's lives who are not parents who are important to them. Maybe it's their friends' parents, maybe it's your adult friends, maybe it's cousins or aunts and uncles or grandparents or neighbors or teachers. There's so many adults who could be important parts of your child's life, and they don't all need to have a parent role in order to be important positive influences for a child. And they also don't necessarily need to be there for an entire childhood to be an important part of a child's life. So you might consider, like if a child has a special relationship with a teacher at school that they really love, and then they change schools or you move, you're probably not going to choose to not move if moving is otherwise a good idea for your family, just because this child is going to miss a teacher. And so the same kind, but your child is going to be sad. You're going to support them through that sadness. Children are resilient and they will recover. And children learning how to deal with losses like that is a part of growing as humans. So that's not to minimize or to say like, oh, don't worry about it, introduce your kids to whoever. I do think there needs to be a lot of conscious consideration about who your children are introduced to, what their roles are in children's lives, and things like that. And like I said, whole other rabbit hole. But the important part of that is the thought exercise of how can people be healthy and important parts of children's lives other than being a parent role. And for a lot of people coming from monogamy, if you got divorced in a monogamous context and started dating someone, they would probably meet your children under the context of being a parent figure or a potential future parent figure, because that's generally the accepted course, right? You get divorced, you date, that person becomes a step parent if it works out. And in polyamory, we get to have a much wider view than that. Partners can be introduced to children as friends. They can be introduced to children as partners. They can be, regularly a part of children's lives. They can be another parent figure, or they can be more like a fun adult around. They can be a confidant. They can play. They can maybe babysit. It depends on what works for everyone involved. And there's no one way, but there are infinite options. So the next thing to consider is, one of the things that I hear is, what if something happens with a child that's challenging and the children need more for a while, and therefore I have less time to date or spend with a partner? And that's super valid, and that super happens. And, it could be like another child is born and there's a really intense newborn phase in which there's not time for as much. Or it could be a child gets sick or is having a really hard time with something, or, life happens. And so one thing to consider is, one thing I want to differentiate there is there's a difference between I don't have time to add a relationship and I'm going to be forced to end a relationship. And so it's really common and normal to be polyamorous and at some points in your life not have the time and energy for an additional partner right now. And so you just don't date anybody new. And that's okay. It doesn't change that you're a non-monogamous person to just not have time for that in a season. As opposed to like, I'm really close to this person. They're really important to me. We've been together for 3 years, but I'm dealing with this tough time, so I'm breaking up with them. And if you think about it like that, like if you were monogamous and this was your one partner and you were dealing with a tough time in your life, would you break up with them? Probably not. You would probably start to ask, like, you might need to communicate, like, I have less time to spend with you right now because I'm dealing with a lot. But you also might, is there a way this person could support me, could make this hard time easier for me? Your partner might want to be like, hey, can I like show up with dinner for you? Would that make your life easier? So thinking about that kind of thing, like if you face a tough time, can you communicate that with your partners? And B, what would feel good to have support? Is there a way that could actually be a positive thing in your life that could nurture and support the challenges instead of being something that has to detract, or has to take away? Another thing to consider is, and so now we're gonna talk more about less about the outside partners and more about the relationship at the top of the hierarchy, the bio parent or step parent or nesting partner relationship, and considering, what are the things that might be driving, that might or might not be helpful, driving that desire for hierarchy. So one thing to consider is, are there fears and insecurities? Because there's this fear that I hear of, like, it's going to hurt the kids in some way. And sometimes that's really the fear. And sometimes that's kind of a mask for the fear is really, I'm going to get hurt. And so really asking, are there fears and insecurities that are actually about me and not about my kids? And my kids are like a convenient way to not have to get in there because it's painful. And if that's the case, then getting some support around working through what those fears and insecurities are, what you're needing, if there's something missing in the relationship with that partner, or if there's some, attachment wounds or things like that. There's a lot there, and I'm not going to try to go into all of the possible reasons that might be there, but it's really important to investigate. It's really important to investigate, why do I really want this, and is there a part of that that's about me that I maybe need to investigate a little bit more. The next piece that's adjacent to that is there communication that's needing to be improved with that partner? Like, is there a fear that you might not find out till after whatever happened? Or is there a fear that that partner might fall in love and not tell you about it? Or that partner might not do a good job of communicating how present they're being in different spheres of their life. And so is there really good communication in that relationship, or is there, or other challenges within that relationship? Are there things that are already needing work in the relationship, and there's a fear that adding more relationships will make those challenges worse or more obvious, or that the band-aids won't be able to cover them anymore? And if that's the case, it's probably true. And the thing to do with that is to work on those challenges, to work on that relationship so that it's stronger, and work on gaining skills. And so then the third piece of that is, one of the things I also hear a lot is that hierarchy is set up as a way to avoid hurt. And we can't always avoid hurt. And sometimes having less authenticity about what we're feeling and wanting can end up making more hurt down the road. And so really thinking about, if hurt happens, if there's a mistake or a miscommunication or something challenging happens in this relationship, do we have the skills to repair? Or does a challenge mean a loss of connection forever? And that circles back to attachment, which again is a whole other rabbit hole about attachment and polyamorous relationships. I mean, that's literally, there's a book. It's a great book. But all of that, the communication and the repair, those are skills. It's not something you're either born with or you don't have. They're skills that can be built. And so if they're not there in the relationship, they're things that can be worked on. And when those things are there, there's often a sense of like, this relationship is so strong. We've got this. We can weather anything. So like, do whatever you want because we're going to be fine. That is the ideal place to be opening a relationship from that sense of such security in that relationship that there is no chance. It doesn't matter. Whatever happens, we're going to weather it. We're going to figure it out together. We're going to be able to talk about it. If we can't talk about it, we know where to go to get somebody to help us talk to each other about it. We've got all the support we need. We've all got our needs met. And so, yeah, we got this. And then the last piece I want you to consider, if you're considering whether hierarchy is a good idea, is if challenging things happen and your kids need more, do you sacrifice things in general? Like, do you sacrifice your friendships, your work, your hobbies? Or do you find ways to still get your needs met, even if those things that you love take less time or get less energy for a season? Do you find ways to continue taking care of yourself and getting your needs met and taking care of your kids? Or do you sacrifice yourself in order to try to take care of your kids? And this doesn't really have anything to do with polyamory. Lots of parents do this. But it's one of the things that can underlie this fear of like, if I have a relationship with a person and then I need to sacrifice everything that matters to me in order to be with my kids, I'm going to have to sacrifice that person. And that doesn't feel good. It doesn't feel good to anybody. And so it's really important to also be looking at, do you know how to make sure your own needs are getting met and your children's needs are getting met rather than being an either or battle for needs to get met. Uh, so I told you I'd close with an alternative way of thinking about this. And so what I really want to give you there is the idea that instead of a parent relationship being at the top of the hierarchy, the kids' needs are at the top of the hierarchy. And what does that change? If the hierarchy is kids' needs come first instead of a relationship between adults comes first, what might shift in how you think about kids' needs and adult relationships? And I also just want to be clear that I don't necessarily think it's healthy for kids to I don't necessarily think it's healthy that way either, because again, with the self-sacrificing and the idea of like kids' needs are the highest can end up making it feel like, oh, well, then I have to sacrifice everything for that. And I don't think that's true. I think it's possible for everyone to get their needs met. But just as a thought exercise of like, if you're having a hard time seeing what it could be like to be in non-hierarchical adult relationships, thinking about what would your relationships look like and how would everyone's needs be getting met if the kids' needs were the hierarchy rather than the adults' needs, or rather than the adult relationship. Uh, okay, so that was a lot, and there's a lot of like tangents there that we can talk about in the future. But I just want to also leave you with, I have a free polyamorous parents group. We meet twice a month virtually. It's open to anybody who wants to learn more about these topics or is dealing with a challenge and is like, would like some wisdom from the community. So that's completely free. You can find that on my website, and the link will be in the description, and you can sign up and come join us, and we would love to have you. And if you're needing a little bit more personalized support, a little bit more help figuring out how to make all this work in your own life, then that's what I do. I have small groups and one-on-one support, and you can find those links in the description as well. So I look forward to connecting with you soon.